Hey everybody, CVH here, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a lineup discussion for the 4 decks you can see on screen. First of all, sorry I haven't done a video in a couple days, been a little bit busy, but one of the things I did today, I took the day off of streaming so I could participate in the TESL Champion Series November Top 32 Legend Finishers Tournament. I know it's kind of a mouthful. I will link the TESL Champion Series Twitch and Twitter in the description if you have no idea what I'm talking about and you want to get involved in some tournaments. These are great community-run tournaments. And once a month they invite the top 32 finishers. The November one was a bit delayed, so that's why we're doing it now. But since I finished top 32 Legend in November, got to participate in this tournament. And these were the 4 decks that I used, and I was able to go undefeated and win the entire thing out of the 32-man bracket. My opponents that I faced along the way were Frenzy 1, Caraconsul, Super Thanks 555. I think there's 3 5s, yeah, there's 3 5s, and then also Valerie Cry in the finals. Actually, Super Thanks and Caraconsul will finish number 1 and number 2 Legend in November, and they had both finished number 1 Legend at different months prior in the past 5 months. So definitely it didn't have the easiest part of the bracket, but that's what happens when you're playing these kind of tournaments. And I just thought I would like to do this video because you might want to know what kind of decks we're seeing play in tournaments, and my general thought process is going through and constructing a tournament lineup. So this was like a last hero standing or last class standing, whatever you want to call it, format tournament, which essentially means every player brought 4 decks. As you can see, the matches were best of 5. First person to 3 wins the match, and the format is once you win with a deck, you have to keep playing it, and if you lose with a deck, that deck is eliminated, and you win by eliminating all 3 of your opponent's decks after the ban portion. Like I said, it's a best of 5, so you see your opponent's classes, and in this case, all the lists were made public, so you look at your opponent's deck lists. This was exactly what my opponents would have been seeing, and they would choose one of my decks that I could not play in that match, and then I choose one of theirs, and then we proceed with the match as I just described. So the main difference between this and the format Conquest, which you might have heard me talk about before, which is kind of the opposite. Once you win with a deck, you have to switch decks, and if you lose with a deck, you have to keep trying to win with it, and you win a match once you've won with all 3 of your decks. The difference between this and that format is in this format it's kind of hard to actually counter a specific style of deck. So what I went for with this lineup were 2 things. Obviously I wanted decks that were strong, but I also wanted flexible decks. I wanted not only decks that I felt comfortable with and I felt comfortable were just good, strong strategies, but also decks that I felt could handle themselves in a variety of different matchups, and a lineup that wasn't strictly one way or the other. While I could make reads on what I thought might possibly be played in the tournament, I wanted a lineup that I could sort of respond. If I lose a game, I want to have a deck in my back pocket that I can switch to, because that's really what happens in a format like Last Class Standing. For example, if you lose to an aggro deck, then they're still going to have to play that aggro deck in the next game unless it was the final game of the match, so it's on you to be able to switch to a deck that you think is going to be strong against it. And I think that's reflected a little bit in my lineup as well, because we have the Rage Archer, Marek Battle Mage, Range Sorcerer, and Token Mage, as you can see. Token Mage, basically an aggro deck. Range Sorcerer, needs no explanation, it's a mid-range deck. Marek Battle Mage is sort of combo-oriented aggro control deck. It's very tempo-y, right? It can play that offensive role, but it can also play that defensive role. So I would classify it as a bit more defensive than even the Range Sorcerer. And of course, the Rage Archer, especially my version, is definitely a control deck. I know a lot of different versions exist, and you can play the more mid-rangey version with Child of Hercene and Belligerent Giants and really get aggressive. This deck can get aggressive if you really need it to, but as you can see, I'm playing the Werebats, the Clockwork Scorpions, Journey to Sovngarde, and this is really my grind it out in the late game deck that is designed to win in the late game. And for the record, yes, I do think all of these are at least workable on the ladder. You might want to make some specific tech differences depending on what you're playing a lot of on the ladder. That's always recommended. But let's get into some of the specific card choices. I guess I'll just go left to right and start with the Rage Archer first and talk about anything that's notably different, notably interesting. Like I said, playing a very defensive version of this deck. And basically my strategy, by the way, with this lineup was to usually ban Control Mage, specifically support Control Mage, whichever version of Control Mage they were bringing. Obviously they could only bring 1 Mage deck, so if it was a Control Mage, that would be the ban, and if they didn't bring Control Mage, might actually ban Rage Archer, might ban a different control deck. But the reason for that is, when I was thinking about decks, not necessarily decks that all of my decks were good against, but decks that all of my decks were somewhat weak to, Control Mage just sort of stuck out. You never really want to be the Rage Archer against Control Mage, especially if they're playing their own Journey to Sovngarde. Despite having support removal, it's not really a consistent game plan. Marek Battle Mage is notoriously weak to Control Mage. Token Mage, a lot of people will say it's not that bad. as a token deck against Control Mage, because yeah, you can have those really explosive starts and sticky creatures like wards and everything, and Divine Fervors are a problem, but overall I would still rather be the Control Mage than the Token Mage personally, and Midrange Sorcerer probably does the best against Control Mage out of the 4 decks I brought because it has relatively hard cards to deal with, but I would probably just get that deck banned if they were playing a lineup with Control Mage, and if I didn't, then I'm still not feeling like it's more than 60-40 with that deck. So based on that, I went with a safe ban of Control Mage, but as you can see, my Rage Archer deck can definitely take it to the long game against a variety of different decks. I definitely thought that people would bring some Altar Assassins, which I didn't face at all, a little bit of Control Scout, anything that goes late that's not Control Mage. I felt pretty okay with my Rage Archer playing against, because the deck can just take it forever with the incredibly value-oriented cards like Eclipse Baroness and Vigilant Giants and all its cycle, and then eventually play Journey to Sovngarde, and you essentially just win with that exact one card, Journey to Sovngarde. And of course, the deck has ample defensive tools if you're up against an aggro deck. So I felt like this is one deck that I definitely wanted to bring because it just has that potential to 3-0 pretty much any lineup that doesn't include Control Mage, which I was going to ban. And it is one of the decks that I also felt very comfortable playing, especially this version. I have a lot of experience with it on the ladder. I felt like, due to its flexible nature of being able to do different things against a variety of different decks, I felt like it would be a good deck to sort of utilize the skill I had with it. Not so much with a mid-range deck like Midrange Sorcerer. I brought that deck because it was strong, but there isn't really too many cool things you can do in a game that really separates you from the opponent if you're playing a mirror match. But I did feel very comfortable with Rage Archer. I will say the one weird card, the weirdest card, there might be a couple depending on what kind of list you've looked at before, the weirdest card is probably Grappling Hook. I still don't have enough games with Grappling Hook under my belt to really justify it or not justify it. I just played it for this tournament for the first time. I felt like it would be sort of a more Swiss Army knife version of the crossbow, because while crossbow is better when you have a lethal out to just get that guaranteed kill, there are times when Grappling Hook's extra damage matters when you're pushing face, or what I was thinking was using it with something with Drain, like the Clockwork Scorpions and the Werebats. I wasn't playing Snaketooth, I was just using the 6 Drain creatures plus the Brynjolf, so I guess that would be 7. And when you're using those, you might actually want the additional 3 attack power from the hook if Drain and getting back into the game is the name of the game, and you're actually being pressured. So if you have a Werebat on the board and your opponent's trying to pressure in the other lane, that's an easy way where Quicksilver Crossbow wouldn't really get it done without a lethal to remove something and drain for a lot at the same time. Besides that, deck's fairly straightforward. Marek Battle Mage. The list is very similar to the list I played recently on the YouTube channel. I did eventually go with the Riften Pickpockets over the Thief of Dreams just for consistency, because I felt like if I was up against one of those value-oriented decks like Control Monk, Control Scout, Altar Assassin, you name it, anything that's not aggro or mid-range basically, I just wanted that guarantee and that choice. And again, Riften Pickpocket did pay off. I think it is a safer pick if you're looking for a card for that slot and you want something that helps against control decks in particular. That's probably the way to go. I stole Eclipse Baroness, I stole Tazcad, in different tournaments when I was playing Pickpocket and Control Mage, obviously you stole Parthenax, anything in those late games, and your opponent's going to have a really hard time playing around it. And then I went with a 3rd Sentinel Battle Mace over the one extra 2-drop I was playing. I think it was Palace Conspirator in the video. Yeah, I like the Battle Mace more. It's just a more universally good card. Although, if you are playing this on the ladder, you might want to gear it a little bit more towards the aggro matchups if you're facing a lot of aggression. For this tournament, I felt fine with the build as it was, and it did perform pretty well for me. Midrange Sorcerer. I have to credit Nerazuri for most of this build. Similar to the Rage and the Marek, I decided to bring Midrange Sorcerer and make it a little bit more flexible. I didn't want a mid-range sorcerer that simply pressured the late game decks. I did include some cards that not everyone includes, just so I could have some more game against the aggro decks should I be in that matchup. Obviously, mid-range sorcerer doesn't do too well against aggro and token strategies, but I just wanted to make sure I had some tools just in case. So of course, I maxed out the 3 Dark Guardians, I played 2 Barrowstalkers, 3 Crown Quartermasters of the 1-drop, the Nerazuri tech that I sort of took from his build were the Corrupted Shades. It just made sense when I was thinking about it, because I did want to include 3 Shadowfen Priests in case I played against Altar decks, or token decks or whatever, because I wasn't really banning those. I was banning support Control Mage, but there are a lot of other decks that could play supports out there, so I wanted to play the 3 Priests, similar to me playing the 3 Dushnik Yal Archers in the Rage Archer, and almost playing Dushniks in addition to Belligerent Giants and Marek as well. But Corrupted Shade just makes sense with Shadowfen Priest, and it's a really, really hard card to deal with for any deck that just has access to, like, Lightning Bolt. Compared to Royal Sage can be annoying, and its high roll potential is way higher than Corrupted Shade, but just jamming a Corrupted Shade on an even board or just a clear board it's really, really hard for not any card not named Piercing Javelin to deal with. And if they do decide to ping it off, or you decide to use it to take trades instead of just pushing 5 damage a turn, which is usually totally fine, then of course we have the 3 Shadowfen Priests in this version, and the 3 Ward Crafters, which can help out and keep it alive. Lucian is probably the other weirder card as well. It was in Nerazuri's list. In theory, it just helps you compound your board advantage on turn 4 if you have to take some trades, and that seems fine. I would like to tell you that I got the effect off at any point during all the matches I played today, but I simply did not. The one time I played it, I was already very far behind on board, and I just played it and conceded the turn after to whatever giant guards or amount of heal that happened. Everything else, pretty much straightforward. I will say that once again I am a huge advocate for Bone Colossus. The card wins games that Worm King's Agent absolutely would not win games, and I feel like if Worm King's Agent was in the deck instead of Bone Colossus, I'm pretty sure that I would have lost a match before the finals. So Bone Colossus is definitely, well, I might have even lost, I don't even know if I played it in the finals actually, I'm just super late right now. But Bone Colossus, the point of Bone Colossus is that on a clear board, it develops a massive amount of pressure, something that Worm King's Agent simply cannot do. If you're fighting for the board still and you need to ping off something, Worm King's Agent is fine. To me, that speaks more of a control deck. I played Bone Colossus on a clear board or a clear lane multiple times. The majority of times it's played is usually on that when your opponent's finally starting to remove your early cards. That's the mid game that gets you to your opponents having 0 life, and that's really what the deck wants to be trying to do at turn 7. It doesn't want to take it much longer than that. And Nogleave, again, one of those flexible cards. And Mystic Dragon, most people do play this. I did play against, I think it was Super Thanks, who was playing mid-range Sorcerer without the Mystic Dragons. He was playing Shades and Royal Sages, really capitalizing on the ability to pressure the opponent. But again, I didn't exactly know what matchups I'd be playing against, and having those additional prophecies in the deck, I felt made the deck just a little bit more flexible. Maybe not as amazing against a control deck, but just a little bit more game against the aggro and mid-range decks where Mystic Dragon can cheese out a win. And finally, we come to the Token Mage. I love tokens a lot, and I was really close to bringing Token Crusader. Honestly, I wish I had a better reason, but the reason I brought Mage instead is simply because I was playing some ladder recently with Token Crusader, and it just didn't really go that well. It didn't feel too good. So I felt like the additional early game consistency of the Ward Crafters and Daggerfalls would help quite a bit, as well as the reach from Lightning Bolt. And of course, Iron's just a superstar. Should definitely be playing Iron in your Token Mage decks. But the deck did perform pretty admirably. It's just a really explosive aggro deck, and I wanted to have one really explosive early game deck to punish anything slower my opponents might be doing. So if my opponent was playing a control deck without AoE, like Drain Vitality or Ice Storm, or just a mid-range or aggro deck, like Token Mage is pretty much good against anything that doesn't have Ice Storm or Drain Vitality. And of course, a lot of things do have those cards, but Token Mage is the deck I would switch to, let's say, if I lost to another mid-range deck. That'd be pretty solid. Most aggro decks can't deal too well with the Token Mage wide board, and of course, I was playing the 3 Dawnstar Healers as well with the 3 Bruma Profiteers for some heal, so the deck does perform pretty well against other aggressive decks, and it can definitely, again, it's the kind of deck that while it does have some weaknesses, it can definitely 3-0 certain lineups because slow decks sometimes don't get off the ground fast enough, and other aggressive decks don't really have other ways to deal with wide boards. So this is a deck that did get banned at least one time. Actually, in round 1, my Sorcerer got banned. In round 2, my Archer got banned. In round 3, my Mage got banned. And in round 4, my... Actually, what did get banned? My Battle Mage got banned. Is that true? A different deck got banned in every round. Huh. And that's actually somewhat expected as I was looking through my notes just now, but clearly not having a clear deck to ban played out pretty well, and I had a deck that I felt comfortable switching to in most situations. One of the problematic situations this lineup ran into was when Super Thanks was playing 2 different aggressive decks with Withered Hand Cultist, because while I felt like my Rage and my Marek were okay enough against aggro decks, not having access to my actions in either of those decks can be a huge problem because Rage really leans on its Archer's Gambits and its Rapid Shots, and Marek leans on the Rapid Shots and Firebolts and Ice Storms, so that was an issue. I banned one of them out, and I just had to kind of get lucky against the other one at least one game, and that did turn out pretty well. My Sorcerer's flexibility a little bit against the Mirror match helped out in order to close that match, and my Mage did get banned in that one because, like I said, it was recognized that my Token Mage was pretty good against other aggro decks. But as a lineup, it did seem to do pretty well. Hopefully this sheds some light on some of the weirder card choices. If you're looking to play a tournament, I strongly recommend checking out the TESL Champion Series again. Don't know what they have planned for the future, but they're a great community-run group, and this format, again, was last class standing, one that I do recommend. A lot of the tournaments out there, the Conquest format, again, that's totally fine. But if you find yourself going into a tournament, hopefully some of what I rambled on about with my lineup construction helped you out a bit. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and stay subscribed for more Legends content. Follow my stream in the description. I'll see you next time.